Welcome to the final coffee chat for EdReports Summer Learning Series. We are so delighted to have so many of you joining us. Again, if you've been to all three so far or for the first time, my name is Pasha Spencer. I am a Senior Specialist of Partnerships. I'll be your facilitator for today. We're so excited to share learnings with you. We're going to uncover a lot of information regarding the state of the materials market. Today's session will focus on key factors for implementing high quality materials with integrity. So we invite you to sit back, grab your cup of coffee, and we're going to dive in. So I'll briefly go over some housekeeping. The first is this webinar will be recorded and available in a follow-up email. There will be related resource links that will be entered into the chat and will be included in a follow-up email. We'll also have a live transcript that will be generated by Zoom, so please be patient with any errors that may occur. And we do have EdReports staff members that will be helping behind the scenes today, so please feel free to use the chat. You can use the Q&A features depending upon your question. For use of the chat, feel free to notify EdReports if you have any technical difficulties. And then for the Q&A feature, you can use that to submit content-specific questions throughout today's webinar. And if you're on social media, be sure to tag @EdReports using the hashtags Materials Matter and Curriculum Chat on Twitter, and we'll be sure to follow you. So let me start with introducing today's panelists. Joining us today, we have Amy Reno, who is the Elementary District Math Coach for MSD Washington Township in Indianapolis, Indiana. She previously taught grades 3 through 5 in DC public schools and earned her master's degree of public policy from Georgetown University. We also have Dr. Natalie Berberian, who has worked in education for over 10 years. She has experience as a classroom teacher, a researcher, and a school administrator. Natalie currently serves as the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Innovation for a pre-K-12 private school in Canoga Park, California. And there she focuses on program development, assessment, as well as innovative learning. And lastly, we have Jonathan Regino, who is the Supervisor of Teaching and Learning for STEM at the Maple Newton School District in Pennsylvania, and he's an EdReports Clave Fellow. He spent over a decade as a middle school math and science teacher and worked for a number of years at the state level as a professional development specialist for the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. I truly look forward to today's conversation. So for our agenda, there are 4 main items here. You'll first hear a little bit about EdReports, what we do, our expertise, and our impact across the country. You'll also hear a background as well as context about the state of the materials market, as well as details about the key findings. Then we're going to dig deeper into key finding 5, which specifically aligns to today's series. And then you'll hear from our panelists, and then we'll get to do a Q&A conversation. And then we will close with some next steps for continuing our conversation and staying connected with us. So I will start with sharing an overview of our mission at EdReports. At EdReports, we work to support educators by providing information and support about high quality instructional materials. And we do this in 2 primary ways. The first is we work directly with educator reviewers who conduct reviews of instructional materials that we provide free of charge, with a goal of really building awareness of the quality of aligned materials and what materials are on the market. We also work directly with states and districts to support their work in identifying quality materials for their local context. So our work has a direct influence on being able to make strong local decisions around instructional materials. And as a result, this really feeds into our theory of action. So our reviews allow us to identify what excellence looks like in materials. Within those reviews, as well as the direct support for states and districts, it enables local educators to demand excellent materials, and we've actually seen the market really respond to that demand by improving the materials they're publishing and releasing for educators to use. And that's something that you've heard a lot about during this summer learning series. You'll also hear more about it today as we dive more into the findings within the State of the Market report. We really believe that reliable information against quality criteria in a quickly changing marketplace helps educators make informed purchasing decisions. And ultimately, that improves student learning and outcomes. So our goal is never to tell you what to do, but rather to share voices of educators just like you and empower you to make great decisions for your classroom, for your school, and for your district. So we're going to move into the reason you are all here, why you registered to be here today, and that's to hear more about the state of the instructional materials market. So it's perfectly fitting to start with some background and context, as well as the why behind this project. So if you don't know, and this is your first time joining us, this is the 4th annual report with EdReports that has been produced since 2018, and it's one that continues to prove to be beneficial. As we learned about in webinar 1, we started this work because the curriculum market for K-12 core materials is $8 billion annually. And there's also very little information about what is being purchased or used. So through our partnership with the RAND Corporation and combining the data from our reviews, we've been able to put it all together and get a better lens on what's happening. So in some of our most recent reports, we were able to do a data snapshot and look at subject area specific work as well. And we've received great feedback about this. It's also been super informative to us operationally. And it's also something our team genuinely enjoys doing. So this is really in alignment with our mission. It's in alignment with the reason we do what we do and why we do it. And we really want to help educators and education advocates across the country get a better handle on what's available, what's being selected and purchased, and what's being used. So here are the 5 key findings from the State of the Materials Market report. And I'll pause here for a moment so you can have time to read them. Today, we will focus on finding number 5. We're going to dive further into the data surrounding that, as particularly as it pertains to implementation. So feel free to take a moment and read that, and then we will move forward. So let's explore some of the key factors and considerations for what it really means to implement high quality materials with integrity. So I'm going to start with data. So within key finding 5, where it says teachers experience low levels of supportive leadership, ongoing coaching, and professional development, we explore 2 aspects of how supportive the environment is for teachers around selecting and implementing their instructional materials. First, what materials do teachers say their principals most encourage them to use? And then second, how much and how effective was the professional learning teachers report receiving? First, on what materials principals most encourage teachers to use as the basis for their lesson plans, we see the highest percentage of teachers indicate that they are most encouraged to use whatever materials they think will be best to meet their students' needs, followed closely by the materials recommended or required by the school or district. So while it is encouraging to see that principals place their trust in teachers to make the best decisions on what will best meet the needs of their individual students, we also know from other studies like the Opportunity Myth and Supplemental Bazaar that it is a difficult task for teachers to source their own materials, and the sources of most materials are not curated or vetted. So in order to support teachers to be in the best position to make these decisions for their students, it is important that teachers have great materials as their base and then get support for how to adapt those or augment them to meet their students' needs. So in addition to having high quality materials, we can lose opportunities for collaboration between teachers, as well as consistency of communication with families when each classroom is finding and using their own things. So that's also something to consider when looking at this. Further, the number of hours teachers spent in professional learning activities related to learning how to implement their main instructional materials and the extent to which professional learning opportunities provided their school or district was prepared to use the curriculum materials, this also was not encouraging. Here we see on the left, 23% of teachers report having spent 0 hours on professional development related to learning how to implement their main instructional materials. 60% with 5 or fewer hours, and then 21% did not feel these professional learning opportunities prepared them at all. 50% felt that it prepared them only to a slight extent or not at all. Cumulatively, this raises the question of how can school and district leaders ensure more tangible supports are provided for teachers, that the materials they need, that they have them to make the day-to-day instructional decisions that they're called upon. And when we combine this information with the first table around what teachers are encouraged to use, we see a missed opportunity for schools and districts to provide curriculum-specific professional learning and collaboration structures across classrooms. So there's a really powerful report from Carnegie's The Elements, and that's called Transforming Teaching Through Curriculum. And it really lays out a vision of professional learning that uses curriculum as both a lever and a guide. It helps to link teachers' actions and ideas to new standards in a concrete, focused way. And a direct quote from that article says, when done right, it can close the gap between the experiences we provide for teachers and those we want them to provide for students. So with that, that is the perfect segue into our panelist discussion. I am super eager to hear from each of you as we dive into your experiences with implementing high quality materials with integrity. So I'm going to invite you all to come off mute, and we are going to dive into our conversation. So the first set of questions is really based upon overall reactions to the key findings. So Natalie, I'll start with you. What were your initial reactions to key finding 5? What resonated with you as it pertains to your work with instructional materials?
Very good question. And I'm very excited to be here and be able to answer questions like this. I mean, the first initial reaction I had to this finding was a mixed bag of emotions, right? So I started off by reading it and I'm like, great. It looks like what we're doing is exactly what we need to do. There's a formula there. It's supportive leadership plus ongoing coaching, and PD is going to equal success. This is what we're doing. It's cementing in what we're doing. But as soon as you get to that second sentence where it says, if this is not the experience teachers report having, it's a letdown. This is where that mixed emotion comes in, right? It's a letdown, but it's a very necessary awakening, right? As that educational leaders need. We think and we have the best intentions when we're working with our teachers to help support them, but this is a great chance to reflect and to step back and see, okay, so these are the things that we're trying to do. The formula is there, the leadership, the ongoing coaching, the professional development, but we need to go back to that whiteboard. We need to go back and we need to tweak this formula a bit and figure out what kind of supportive leadership are we giving, right? What can we do a little bit differently for the coming year? What does coaching look like, right? What kind of instructional coaching are we providing? And how do we need to tweak that a bit to make sure that it's meeting the needs of our specific teachers at our school sites? And finally, professional development. The studies are out there, right? So we need to figure out what kind of professional development opportunities are we giving to our teachers? What kind of culture of learning are we supporting? And how do we need to tweak that as well to make sure that it is the most impactful and respectful of our teachers' time and learning? So this was it really struck my heart, and it was necessary for me to really step back and say, okay, we need to go back and figure out how do we tweak this and make it better.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Jonathan, this next question is for you. So we know that teachers reported that implementing high quality instructional materials in an environment that is supportive, along with coaching and professional development, is not consistent with their experiences. So I'm curious to know from you, why do you think that is? And what are the implications of this?
I think Natalie teed this up with everything that we're missing and the causes for it. The study came out and said teachers are getting less than a day of PD. I don't know anything in my life that I could master in a day, let alone do well after just a day of training. It'd be awesome to have the ability to have coaches, but we know with the teacher shortages, those coaches are slowly being eliminated and put into the classroom. The supervisors of curriculum are being put into classroom. So you add that one day of training, you add the lack of support, and you add pieces in there. We know change takes 3 to 5 years. And if you don't have planned out for up 3 to 5 years, if you don't know what else is going to happen, you don't know what else you're going to change, you're just setting it up where I'm going to do my best and I'm not going to be supported.
Definitely. A lot of great points there. Amy, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. So based upon what Natalie and Jonathan have previously shared, what do you think the characteristics of strong, effective coaching that are grounded in high quality instructional materials and a supportive environment for implementation, what do you think they consist of?
Well, I think it starts with strong relationships between the coaches and the teachers. Just for any coaching program, if you're implementing any kind of a change or working towards improvement within your organization. And I think that one way trust can be built is through the competence of coaches to really know and understand those high quality instructional materials. They need the knowledge base in order to be able to support their teachers effectively, but that's also a trust builder when I know that I can go to my coach and get my questions answered and get the support that I need to understand the materials better so that I can implement the materials better. And I think along with that, as Jonathan was saying, as schools or districts might not have coaches to begin with, or might be shifting those positions into the classroom, you're always going to have a building leader. And so if the building leader has a knowledge of the program that you are implementing and can build those relationships with teachers, then they can support and advocate for the curriculum that has been adopted, as well as for the coaching program, if you have that coaching program in your building. But I think the finding of that principals are not always encouraging use of the adopted aligned materials. I think that it can start there for that support and advocacy, even if there's not a coach in the building.
Definitely. Yeah. And I love your use of the word advocacy. That's obviously very important as it pertains to this. Jonathan, another question for you. How can districts ensure that as they are implementing new materials, that they're intentional in their efforts to foster an environment that is supportive and collaborative?
Yeah, there's a framework that was made famous by Peter Senge, but it was originally the framework for systems thinking and changes in schools. And it has these 6 pieces that I think anytime a school district is looking to implement curriculum, if they're looking to make a change, you need to be able to answer these 6 pieces. The ideas around trust, about vision, skills, resources, the results you want, and the action plan. And I think if you can't answer how the change is going to be implemented based off those 6 pieces, you're leaving teachers in a mindset where pieces are missing and they're going to be frustrated, and you're going to not be able to implement as well as you could. So I think having a plan and voicing that plan out loud and making it so everybody knows what's involved, especially long term, that's the best way to ensure that the implementation is going to happen correctly.
Thank you so much. Well, that's the perfect transition into our next set of questions. So let's talk about having a plan for implementation. Jonathan, in your experience, what are some of the key factors for implementing high quality curriculum with integrity?
So I think you need to begin with the vision. Like, what is it that we want to see? before we even start with the materials, before we even decide that we need new materials, we need to know exactly what the teachers need to look for, what the students are going to look for, and then what the district and school is going to look for. Once you have that vision, that's where you start to build your rubric of the material for the materials you're going to look at. You know, too many times we go after, you know, the school, another school's using it, they did really well, so we're going to use it. And their circumstances don't match what your circumstances are. We need to be very individualistic about this idea of just because it worked one place doesn't mean it's going to work here. We need to figure out what we want out of it and then go after that information to pick our high quality materials.
Great, thank you. Amy, I'm curious to hear from you. So when creating a strong plan for implementation of your new materials, what steps have you taken to ensure that there's alignment and accountability across teams?
Well, like Jonathan said, I think the key word there is plan. You want to have that plan. And we used EdReports resources to create a launch and implementation plan. And I've got the outline of what we created, and that'll be a resource in the chat for you all. But I think a key part of that was our theory of action. And I just keep sharing that of this is why, in our case, we made a change to different instructional materials and what we're hoping to gain from it. And so committing everyone to that same theory of action, which ends just like EdReports theory of action with student outcomes, we can agree on the steps to get there because we can agree on that goal. And then as I thought through those different project areas, I developed some recommendations for a strong implementation. And I shared those with our building leaders and we are fortunate to still have instructional coaches in our buildings. And that resource should be going in the chat as well. And so these are different areas, in some cases, just for building leaders to think through how ready is their building for a change. So if you're in a position for a change, some things to think through. But then building leaders do have some flexibility in the what and the how that they might implement these recommendations, because they are coming from the district level. But then it becomes a touch point for my work with our building coaches of how is planning going? How are the data PLCs going? And we are, as a team of coaches, a core implementation team, which you can see there is one of the recommendations. And I think it's great if buildings are able to have an implementation team to talk about how that's going. But even if they don't, we're going to be doing that at the district level to talk about those challenges, acknowledging that they will come. So not putting on rose-colored glasses just because we have high quality instructional materials, but having a plan to address those challenges in a way that holds to the integrity of the materials.
Thank you so much. That was really great. Natalie, how have you helped teachers implement new materials with integrity? And how is the teacher-student experience with those new materials going? And what have you learned?
It's a really great question because it makes you stop and recognize the difference between implementing materials versus implementing with integrity, and making sure that your leaders and everyone involved in this process is making sure that that integrity piece is there, that there is alignment to the vision with the curricular goals to make sure that it's aligned to what our data is showing in our schools, right? So starting off with that, and it's, I think the most important thing that I try and do as a leader is making sure that I'm stopping to understand, what do our teachers need? Right? At the end of the day, it stops there. Like, what do our teachers truly need? And it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach for our teachers. We need to ask, we need to listen, and we need to get to work. And I think it needs to be a very tailored approach for each teacher to make sure that you're getting them the materials and the things that they truly need. So great, we have this high quality material now. What do we do to implement it? What does having that conversation with every single person to see, do you want it? Do you need more hands-on materials? Do you need more resources? Do you need more specifically tailored PDs to help you with this kind of lesson that you're trying to do, right? So I think those are all getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual implementation process is very important. Our school has gone through a lot of changes, and I know that this is very common across the nation, right? With COVID, with remote learning, we were we were on the hunt for high quality materials. But with these changes, with the pandemic, there was really a fire under us to help us push us to get those high quality materials faster. And so we've had a lot of change. And I think Jonathan mentioned it takes years to adapt to change, but we needed to do it quickly because the end goal is making sure our students are succeeding and have what they need in the classroom. And with that, the biggest thing that we've learned is just making sure that, we understand there is a learning curve and we're embracing that learning curve because it's not going to be perfect. Amy mentioned, there's taking off those rose-colored glasses. Great, we have that high quality material, but now what? We're all learning, we're all taking time to be a part of it. And honestly, the biggest lesson that we've learned is we can have the material, but we need to be honest with ourselves that we're not going to get to everything. We're not going to get to everything that is in that package of that high quality material, and that's okay. And the way to do that correctly is to focus on power standards, right? This is where we've been doing a lot of research, and we utilize Dr. Douglas Reeves' resources on power standards to identify what are the most essential skills to give that our students need, and making sure that our teachers are tailoring their instruction to that so the implementation process is a lot smoother.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Natalie. So Jonathan, this is a question for you, and we're actually going to move into the area of supportive environment and leadership and professional development, which was also a huge part of this key finding. So when teachers have access to quality materials in an environment that is supportive and conducive to success, what are some of the benefits that you've observed and experienced?
Well, there's less work on the outside, right? If you start with good materials, you're not searching after school for the way to differentiate. You're not looking for things for special ed, for gifted, for EL. It's there, it's in the program. So if we start with high quality materials, we lessen the workload, and every teacher needs that to happen. And then the other piece is teachers become excited. They become the advocates for the curriculum. They become the advocates for the implementation. So start with something good and everybody gets on board.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Natalie, how do you support teachers' choice, agency, and responsibility while implementing materials with integrity?
I think those three key components come down to teacher voice and making sure that our teachers' voices are invited to the table and they're the loudest voices there because they're being treated as the experts that they are, because they know what's going on in their classrooms. They're the ones that are with the students day in and day out. So their voice truly matters. And I think that's the most important component to keep at the forefront of our minds while going through this process and being the supportive leaders that we need to be. And that voice starts with even before the implementation process. It starts in the decision-making process. So we are fortunate to have organizations like EdReports so we can refer to, and as leaders, we do the legwork, we bring in all the materials, but giving teachers a voice to choose, to sift between the different high quality materials and have their voices be heard in saying, this is the material I would like to see in my classroom. And then also then moving on to the next step, once the curriculum is chosen and it's in the classrooms, respecting the voice of teachers and how they learn, right? We advocate for our students as being diverse learners. That doesn't stop with students. We're all diverse learners. So teachers are not going to learn in the same way in a cookie cutter kind of system, right? So it's so discouraging to see those facts on, or the percentages that so many teachers don't get professional development. But when they are getting professional development, is it tailored to their needs, right? Some teachers like the hands-on approach where someone is helping them through the entire process. Some teachers are on the other end of the spectrum where they want to just dive into the curriculum on their own and really get to know it and come up for air when they're ready. And that's when they're ready to start talking about it. So it's getting to know your teachers, getting to give them the voice to say, this is how I want to learn. And then continuing to treat them as the experts that they are. So it doesn't stop at the curriculum aligned professional development that you're giving them. giving them the voice to be the experts and to teach one another, and hold these coffee and collaborative sessions with your teachers once a month, twice a month. Provide the coffee, provide the space, and ask them to share how are they doing with implementing this curriculum in the classroom. Have them share it with one another, because that's the most valuable experiences and commentary we're going to get at the end of the day.
Definitely, yes. So Amy, to what Natalie mentioned, I'm curious about what you learned about professional learning to support the implementation of new materials. I know in one of our previous conversations, you talked about how you've mapped out professional development as you prepared for implementation. So what was your messaging, and how did you ensure teachers had a clear understanding?
Yeah, I think the professional learning is key. If you don't know the materials well, you're not going to be able to implement them well. So we actually started our professional learning journey with our new curriculum with our coaches. And the curriculum that we went with, fortunately, has a series of professional learning experiences. And so we gave our coaches a level 2 training first. And then over the summer, we provided multiple opportunities for our teachers and our coaches to get that level 1. What are the basics of the program that you need to understand in order to be launching into implementation in our year 1? And so as part of that, I attended all of those sessions with the coaches, with the teachers. And I set up the session by reminding everyone of our original goals. So Jonathan and Natalie both talked about having a vision. I think if you can articulate what you're looking for in your instructional materials for that particular content of what you think is going to best serve students, we formatted that into a goal that guided our adoption process. It guided our implementation process, and it will continue to guide us. Are we seeing what we want to see as we implement? And so that helped to produce that alignment across the district as well. Everyone was hearing the same message about why we're doing what we're doing and getting everybody on board. We were also fortunate to have a leaders PD that this vendor had developed. And so building leaders and coaches participated together to learn about the curriculum at a higher level, so that, again, they could provide that support and that advocacy from their role, and so that everybody in the district is aware of it. And as far as ongoing professional learning, because it shouldn't be a one-time sit and get like the report showed, it shouldn't just be one day. We are fortunate to have coaches in our buildings. And as part of that recommendation doc, there are different professional learning structures that you can do in your buildings. It doesn't have to be come to a central place and do a sit and get. It can be learning walks, it can be lab classrooms, and those can be led by lead teachers if you don't have coaches in your building. So there's lots of different opportunities for ongoing professional development provided by people that are in the building and relevant and have the relationships with teachers, rather than just outside folks coming in, which is certainly valuable to have that consistent message. But then when you really want to key in on the implementation needs of a particular context or a particular building, it helps to have folks who know the people and the students in that building to be able to tailor those experiences to their needs.
Definitely. A lot of great points. Thank you. So let's move into ideas, recommendations, suggestions for implementing with integrity. I know you all have shared so many great points. So Jonathan, based upon your experience, I know you talked about vision. What sort of common vision or expectation for curriculum implementation is necessary at the district level? And how have you seen districts communicate this vision as part of the implementation process?
Yeah, I think teachers need to be involved at every single step of this, right? The minute that a teacher's not involved in the conversation is when we start to go off the tracks. The districts need to share the why of everything that we're doing. And if a teacher can't explain that to anybody in the district, then we know we have a miscommunication. And we really need to get back to that level where teachers are involved in every piece of that decision-making, where they're voicing their opinion, what they need in their classroom, what they want to see out of the materials, and whether they want to be part of the process or not. We have to keep asking them for feedback all along the way, give them the opportunity to say anything about what we're doing. So that way, when we start to implement this, It's not they told me to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'm invested in this because I've been part of the process, where I had the opportunity to be part of the process.
Thank you. Natalie, this one's for you. So you've mentioned the value of coaching conversations and talking through challenges and talking through barriers very transparently. So in adopting new curriculum, what's the best approach to support teachers in that?
Honestly, I think the best approach is being realistic with our staff, with our teachers, to be honest about the fact that now we have the high quality materials, but there are going to be challenges. It's not going to be perfect the first year in, or maybe even the second year in, and helping hopefully our teachers feel like they can let their guard down a little bit. As educators, I think all of us are perfectionists for the most part. And to really feel like, oh, I have to get to all of this. I need to get all of this done perfectly. And just to make sure that I'm fully implementing it with integrity. But if the school leaders are discussing it and are being honest and saying that, look, it's not going to be easy and that's okay, but we're going to learn together. This is, something that we're going to go through together, and we're going to come out of it and we're going to be so much more knowledgeable, and we're going to help reach our goals for our school, but it's going to take some time, rather than having these unrealistic expectations that by, the first quarter, everybody should be implementing it with full fidelity, making sure that everything is perfect. So I think that honesty and upfront communication style makes it more of a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach, right? So it makes it feel like everyone's in this together and we're learning every step of the way together.
Definitely. Thank you. Amy, what guidance can you offer to educators around their specific implementation process, and then how to best support their teachers? And are there any additional supports or resources that educators will need in order to implement?
Well, I think that developing a theory of action is really important. And especially if your theory of action is going to end with student outcomes, which if we're implementing or adopting high quality instructional materials, it should end with student outcomes. So what you're wanting to see from students, and then what do you need to do to get there? So whether you're making a change or if you're just renewing your commitment to high quality materials that you already have in place, I think articulating that and communicating that to get everybody on board is really important. And then determining who your key implementation leaders are. So of course, building leaders, whatever district support or coaches or key teachers within buildings, making sure that their knowledge base is built up and that they have support in order to be able to support teachers is really important. And then, like Jonathan and Natalie have both said, providing opportunities to hear from teachers. So attending those PD sessions with them, being in the buildings, teaching some lessons with the materials so that you as a leader have the same experience that the teachers have in using the materials to plan for and then deliver instruction, and then being vulnerable as you debrief the lesson with the teacher to show how you didn't get it right the first time either, right? And that we really are all learning together. And you might even create structures to hear feedback from your teachers about how it's going. What are the challenges? What are the successes? Because I think when teachers are valued and they feel supported, then they're more likely to implement the materials well, which is the whole point of adopting high quality materials in the first place, is that they get implemented well to improve your student outcomes in however you want to define that, whether that's data, we define it by self-efficacy as well, and students' feelings about math, but whatever those student outcomes are that you're looking for, you want to be implementing well with those high quality materials.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to move into Q&A. There's quite a few questions coming in from the attendees today. So anyone can take this next question. So the first question is, can you share any research that has guided your work regarding implementation of high quality curriculum?
So I can start. I did rely on EdReports, and as a starting place, it looked like a lot of their or your materials was based on the group Instruction Partners. And so they have kind of a fuller and more detailed implementation plan or things to think through when you're implementing. There's also a group called Impact, Learn, and Lead. And so they have dug into implementation science and implementation research, especially as it relates to the field of education. So those are some sources that I relied on when thinking about the theory of action and developing the plan, and all of those ideas around consistent messaging and communication were really helpful resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Here's another question. What can districts do in advance of purchasing materials to understand professional learning offerings from the publisher to ensure the district's professional learning plan can be met?
I'll jump in. My district just ran into this problem. We bought a writing program. We asked the publisher ahead of time what the PD was going to be. It sounded great. And then we find out it's a third-party organization, and they are booked for 2 years. So we're getting to the point now that we're trying to plan out the PD even before we meet with publishers. And one of the things that we're looking at, University of Delaware's Teacher College actually trains local school districts in IM math. And we started reaching out to our local universities and our colleges around us to design times where their teachers, their students come in and they act as subs, and we can send our teachers for PD. So we solve the sub problem and the PD problem all in one thing. And then that way our teachers are getting expert training, and their students are getting experience in the classrooms and getting used to the materials that we're using. So in the long run, they have an easier entry into our district. But I think at this point, if we're meeting with a publisher and within the first 3 questions we asked about PD, and if they don't have a long-term plan, like something like Amy suggested earlier, we end the conversation and we move on. Even if it's the best thing out there, we have to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So another great question, how important is it, or is it important to implement the curriculum with fidelity before moving to integrity?
That's a really good question. I think it's very important, obviously, to consider both, but fidelity and integrity. But I think the most important part of it first is making sure that the teachers are understanding that it's aligned, again, to the vision, to the mission of what we're trying to get across, what we're trying to do for our students, and what the outcomes are. So at the beginning, it goes back to giving our teachers some grace and making sure that they're giving themselves some grace to understand, to really get their feet wet with the program, to make sure that they're understanding the ins and outs of it, so that they can and have a timeline for that, right? Have a timeline. So it's not just like you have this whole year, but have a timeline, have check-ins, have all that support, so that at a certain point now we're ready to make sure that we are implementing it with integrity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. So this is I love this question. Do you have any tips about how to monitor success of implementation, including tips for soliciting teacher feedback?
So our publisher has an implementation support tool that we can use as a guide to see, are we holding fast to those key pieces of the program that need to be maintained in order to maintain the integrity of the program. So I think that's one way to monitor, but some people hear that and think, ooh, checklist, and they're checking, am I doing it right or not? And I think that's the second piece of your question, Pasha, is we need to be transparent with teachers that this is what we're looking for and this is what we're all working towards. Even if we don't hit the mark in September and October, we want to have that idea of a growth mindset and that this is what we want to be growing towards. So in my district, we had a an adoption committee that was made up of teachers. And we met after school a couple times throughout the year as we were going through our selection process. And that committee is going to transform this year into an implementation committee, where I'll continue to meet with teachers a couple times throughout the year to hear from each of the buildings, from them, not just through their coaches, but directly from them about the challenges and successes of implementation. So that's one structure that we have already in our district that I'm tweaking a little bit for this year. But I think that there are other ways through building leaders, through Google Forms is a great thing to send out, you know, a quick 2 to 3 questions that can be blasted to teachers, and everybody sits down to do it in the first 3 minutes of a staff meeting. That you answer just a quick 2 to 3 questions about how things are going. I think you can collect a lot of information that can inform decision makers who maybe can't be everywhere in all the places at once.
Definitely. Awesome. Great. Well, I wish we could just keep going and going. There's so many great questions that are coming into the chat, and we will do our best to follow up and answer those. I am going to go ahead and move us forward. Thank you so much for participating in the Q&A to all of our attendees. So here's how you can continue the conversation with us. Here at EdReports, we are always wanting to learn from others and explore opportunities to work together. As I stated, we support states and districts directly in these 4 ways, and we certainly can customize our level of support to meet whatever your needs are. So definitely, we'd love to hear from you. Please stay in contact with us, and there's just more to come on the conversation. You can reach out to our partnerships team at the email address at the top of the screen. Also, feel free to contact me directly. My email is listed right below my picture. And as I said, a follow-up email will be sent after today's webinar. And we look forward to continuing this great conversation. You know, there's just so much more to be said about instructional materials, and we want to stay connected and continue to learn and grow in this work. So with that, thank you so much for attending the Summer Learning Series. This is the final of all 4 for the State of the Instructional Materials Market. Thank you again, Natalie. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jonathan. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate your contribution today. And thank you, EdReports team in the background for getting all the resources out. So thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.